6 verses could take us half the time, and then the rest of the verses would take us the other half of the time. Depends on how many questions you got. Okay? So, 15. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. Your reward will be very great. But Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless. And the heir of my house is Eleazar of Damascus. And Abram said, Behold, you have given me no offspring, and a member of my household will be my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, This man shall not be your heir. Your very own son shall be your heir. And he brought him outside and said, Look toward heaven and number the stars if you are able to number them. And he said to him, So shall your offspring be. And he believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness. Good. It seems pretty self-explanatory, maybe? Comments, questions, concerns? Where do you want to start?
Certainly a strong faith.
Strong faith. We like that of Abram. Good.
But was there a little lacking? I mean, a little weakening of faith? Because he's saying, okay.
Verse 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was told he was gonna have a son, but now he's still sort of talking back and doubting, yeah.
Okay. So, like I said last week, Abram kind of seems like this kind of roller coaster ride, right? Up and down, up and down, up and down. We don't know what to make of him. Okay? So, in Genesis 12, he was told to go to Canaan, and he went. It was really good, okay? Then he went to Egypt and had maybe not so great of a demonstration of faith by giving his wife to the Pharaoh, okay? Genesis 13, Abram and Lot separate. And it seems like Abram kind of picks the okay spot, so that's good, right? And then 14, we have Abram going out and fighting a really powerful king, and he wins, which is good. And then we have Melchizedek, okay, who blesses him, which is a good thing. And now we have chapter 15, which starts out with Abram doubting God's promise. Not so great.
Well, evidently him and his wife went for years without children.
I mean, they're not getting any younger,
Right.
right? So what's supposed to happen here? What's Abram supposed to do? God promises him a son. They don't have a son. So God, you're promising me this stuff without the proof. What am I supposed to make of this? Right? So, like, is Abram's doubt okay?
Yeah.
It is okay. So, is this a good thing or a bad thing?
He's just asking a question.
He's just asking. Let the boy ask God a question.
It's human.
It's human, right? So doubting is not a good thing. We're not going to call doubting a good thing. But doubting happens to everybody. It's a human reaction because...
Unexpected.
Well, so we're going to say doubt is not a good thing. Okay? If something's not a good thing, what's the origin of it? Sin, which we all have. Okay? Does God forgive sin?
Yes.
Does God forgive doubt?
Yes.
Yes. Good. We're good to go. Okay? So, Abram's doubting. What are we going to make of that? He's human. It's not like, yes, it's a big deal, but it's not a big deal.
How's it going to be done?
What?
How is it going to be done?
God's will is going to be done regardless.
His
in his time frame, okay? So if God promises it, Abram doesn't see it, what's Abram really doing? Is he really doubting?
He's just saying, what's your plan?
What's going on here?
This is what you're saying. I'm looking at, this is my.
This is the proof that I'm seeing.
Here, so
So,
explain to me a little bit deeper.
so it does not equate in my feeble mind, so I need you to tell me what's going on. Right? Is that okay for us to do that?
Yeah.
I think we should do that, right? If you read about half of the Psalms, that's what the Psalms do, right? God, you promised me, not success, but you promised me your blessing because I believe in you. I'm not feeling very blessed right now. I don't see the blessing right now. So what's going on? I need you to explain this to me because I can't see it. Okay? So Abram's pretty much doing that. Hey God, you promised me a son. I don't want this other guy, Eliezer of Damascus, to be my heir. I want my son to be my heir. So, what's up? Right? So we can label that as doubt. We could label it as the more Lutheran way of doing it would be to say that Abram is asking God to fulfill his promise that he made to him. Okay? That sounds a little bit more faithful. Okay?
And the Lord said he would.
And the Lord said he would.
So he wants it now.
You know what? Well,
It's like a child.
again, do you blame Abram for wanting it now?
No.
What's that? What was that one commercial? It's my money and I want it now.
Oh.
J.G. Wentworth,
Yeah.
right? It's my money and I want it. It's my son and I want it now. Okay, like I guess that's all right, you know, because it was the promise that God gave him. So I don't blame Abram for doing that because again, he's getting older. Abram understands the way of the world. The older you get, the less chances are you're going to have a kid. So, God, let's get going here. Time is running out. Alright? So, Abram seems faithful sometimes. We're going to see later on that Abram maybe seems less faithful at other times, which I would argue mirrors our own relationship with God, where sometimes we are hyper faithful and sometimes we are hyper doubtful, and that's okay. Okay? So, here we go. Good. So we covered the doubt. What else do we see in there?
Promise of many offspring.
The many offspring, as more than you can count, more than the stars in the sky. Okay?
And how can his wife do that?
And how can his wife do that? That, like, as a man, right, I don't understand all of that completely because I will never have a kid come out of my body. That's a really big deal. It's a very big deal. And then to say more than the stars in the sky? No, thank you. Right? That is weird.
Yeah, but isn't God basically saying over the generations I will multiply?
Yeah, so shall your offspring be. I mean, yeah. So that seems unlikely when you have not even one son. Okay? So again, Abram's calling God out to say, hey, you promised this to me. Where's the promise? That's okay for us to do. That's not necessarily doubting. That's saying, God, I believe that your word is true. I don't see it coming true. What's going on?
Too many other issues.
A lot of many others.
But the last 1 says, and he believed the Lord.
Yeah, so after God said it, then he was like, oh, well, all right, well, you said it again. Good to go. Believe it. And God counted that faith to him as righteousness. So it's not so much like, oh, well, God, imagine him going back to Sarah, because husbands and wives talk when you get home, right? So it's like, well, I talked to God again, and kind of promised me a son again, and believe it when I see it, But it's more of a, like, yeah, no, God said it, so that's what we're going to go with. And Sarah has to be like, come on, right? Poor Sarah. I feel for Sarah in these chapters. Okay, so I hope you noticed while I was reading the two words that I accentuated. Behold, right? Have I talked to you about that before in here? Right? Behold is hine. Do it real quick. So, hine in Hebrew basically means like, watch out. Behold, like, look at this. This is going to be something that you need to know. Pay attention right now. Not pay attention in the paragraph or the next sentence. Pay attention right now. Okay? So we're going to see, I highlighted 4 times in this chapter where we have the word behold. Behold is more important in the Old Testament than it is in the New Testament. Hine is stronger in Hebrew than idu in Greek for behold. So sometimes we'll see behold in the New Testament, and it's good, like you need to look. But in Old Testament, it's much, much stronger. And you can hear that in the word itself, right? Hine, now. In Greek, it's idu. Like, all right.
And you notice the first behold comes from Abraham.
Right. So he's referring to God, right? God, behold, like, look, there is nothing here. What am I supposed to do? Right? Yeah, no, that's, I really like that, right? That the first one comes from Abraham. Okay, anything else? I've got more, yeah.
Is he talking here about believers being, like all of us being believers?
Very good. I love that connection. Okay, so I'm gonna say what you said in just different words, and you tell me if I'm rephrasing it correctly. Okay, so the descendants that God has promised to Abraham or Abram, which is going to be more than the stars in the sky, does that include us? Is that what you're asking? Okay, so what's the answer? Yes, why?
We're children of God.
We're children of God, but we're not all children of Abram, right? Because we're Gentiles. Okay? So are Gentiles part of this promise right now? No, they're not. This is the Israelite nation. Right? Okay. Are we as Gentiles children of God? Yes.
But not until later.
But not until after Jesus comes. Right? Because the Gentiles that came into the Israelite nation, they had to adopt all of their customs, all of their laws, do all of the things that they were supposed to do in the Old Testament. So when does that happen?
After all of the Jews have rejected him, and then he goes into the Gentiles.
Who?
Jesus.
Jesus says, hey, y'all aren't listening to me. I've got other people that I need to bring into my house. And so he dies for all of the universe. And Paul says, well, hey, all of you Gentiles that think that this God is not for you because you're not Jewish, hey, you've been grafted into the tree. You're not originally part of the tree, but now you are. And that's a really cool thing. You're the graft. Okay? So are we part of Abraham's family? Yes. now, but right now in Genesis 15, no. Okay? So that's what makes the New Testament so much cooler, because it fulfills the promise that happens in Genesis 15. Does that answer your question? That's not where you thought I was going with it.
So now I know why.
That's okay. That's okay. Was that a light bulb moment? A little bit?
That's burned out.
Okay. Good. That was an excellent connection question.
Now we have special light bulbs.
What else?
Who is Eleazar?
What is going on with this Eleazar of Damascus? Have we ever heard of him before? No. Are we ever going to hear about him again? No.
But
It's the
Abram's,
only time he shows up in the whole Bible.
and Abram certainly doesn't want him to be
So
inherit his
Abram,
stuff.
so apparently he's some kind of slave, some kind of servant, some kind of indentured bond servant, something.
Where do you get that?
Because he's the heir of his house. So either you could do he's like a foreign, like a relative that lives in Damascus and isn't with him. You can make that argument. But we don't have the name Eleazar in any of the other genealogies, so that doesn't really work. Or we can say, it's verse 4, this man shall not be your heir. So it was common practice for for couples that did not have children to adopt a slave to inherit their inheritance. So it's safe for us to assume that Eleazar was part of Abram's household. What that would have looked like, and what kind of servant capacity that looked like, if he treated him as a son, if he treated him as a slave, we don't know. But he was probably living with Abram.
The King James Version says the steward of my house.
Steward of his house. So he lives with him as like a butler, maybe, I don't know, right? I don't know what stewards did.
Abram's household was huge.
And he had a ton of stuff going on, right? All of the herds and the flocks that we dealt with in chapter 13. You needed a full-time job guy to do that. This wasn't like you do this from 1 to 2 on Fridays, right? Like this was a full-time job. So he hired a steward to do this stuff, okay?
But he must have been trusted to a point
Yeah.
to have been chosen.
And so I have the Hebrew written down. I don't know if you care about the Hebrew at all. But the word heir in Hebrew has the same consonants as the word Damascus, which is interesting. Okay? So you see, and the heir of my house is Eleazar of Damascus. So there's a little word play there between the word heir and Damascus. Why? Because Damascus, if you remember on your maps, if some of you have your maps from before, Damascus is not part of Canaan. Damascus is where? It's northwest of that in Syria. Okay? So Damascus is not going to be part of the land that is promised to Abram. So why would Abram not want that? Because that's not where God has promised his family is going to be from. Okay? He says, hey, I don't want this foreigner that you haven't promised me to be my heir. I want the promise that you gave me, which actually sounds faithful. Okay? So that's interesting. And that's all I can say about Eleazar. That's all we got. Okay? But Abram doesn't want a foreigner to inherit his land. He wants someone blessed by God to do that. Okay? Good.
Which is something we all really want.
Which is a human thing, right? You want to give the stuff that you collected and your inheritance to your kids, not to some guy who buys your house after you die, not to some random. Okay, so that's a human desire that we have, I think, and I think that's okay to want to give our inheritance to our relatives. Okay, it's not bad.
Didn't Abraham
Well, he had Lot, right? Lot was his nephew. We're going to see that Lot does not end up very well in chapter 19. And so we don't know what happens to his relationship with Abram after Sodom and Gomorrah. Chances are it's not great. Okay? So, a couple other things I want to mention. The Hebrew in verse 2, when it says, "For I continue childless," the Hebrew does not say "I continue." The Hebrew says "I will die." So it's a little bit stronger, okay? "O Lord God, what will you give me? For I will die childless, and an heir of my house is Eleazar of Damascus." It's a little bit stronger, okay? And then also in verse 4, he says, "This man shall not be your heir, your very own son shall be your heir." The way that it says very own son is like the nice way to say it. The Hebrew way of saying it is the thing that will come out of your loins. Okay? So he's making it very physical to prove that it's actually going to be his son. Okay? And Hebrew does that. It takes a lot of the phrases that we would never use that in English, but it changes the phrase to make it more of a reality, more of a physicality way of describing it, which I actually find to be very helpful. Because when you make something physical as humans, that makes it more real to us. Okay? Any questions about verse 6? I can make it complicated for you. We'll just do it for like 4 minutes. Okay? So, "And he believed the Lord, and he credited it," or he counted it to him as righteousness. The problem with this phrase, because that's exactly what it says in Hebrew, "and he counted it to him as righteousness." If you know anything about English, do we have any former English teachers? No? Anybody love the English language? No?
Who is
The
he and
problem
who is
is
it?
the word antecedent. Do you remember that from your English classes? What does antecedent mean? The thing that the pronoun refers to. Okay? So, when you read, "and he counted it to him as righteousness," who's the he?
Abraham.
We had 2 different people say 2 different things. Okay? Because it gets confusing because the he could be either God or Abram. So either God's counting, what's the it? We don't know. Well, we do know, but I'm going to make it confusing for you and then explain it to you. To him, and so either Abram's counting his belief to God because he explained it to him as righteousness, that God is just and God is right, that he is going to complete his promise. Okay? Or God is counting the blessing to Abram as righteousness. Can you see how it can be read both ways? Okay?
Why is it not capitalized then?
The
he.
the ESV does not always capitalize for God when it's a pronoun. It capitalizes the G in God, but it doesn't always capitalize the he as the pronoun.
Well,
I would prefer it to be capitalized, but I don't always get my way.
I would look at this as saying at the beginning of that sentence, and he believed the Lord. So Abram believed the Lord. And Abram counted it to himself, as righteousness, believing what the Lord is saying.
Oh, I've never heard that one before. And Abram counted it to himself.
As righteousness. Is
So he
what is
thought-
being done
He
is
thought
righteous.
he thought himself was really good.
No, what the Lord has done. His
Believing-
back
So
at the
he counted
beginning
it
is
to God as righteousness.
yes.
Believing in his word.
Yeah.
Mm.
Because okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that both of the he's that start the sentences should be the same.
Yes.
Or that would make the most sense.
Both of the he's would and the him would all be referring to Abram.
That is one way to interpret it. How do we feel about that?
In the English language, that would be true.
In English, that can be true. You can also make the argument that it should be, and you can make the argument that the he in the second phrase is the Lord, because usually with antecedents, whichever one is closest is the one that it refers to. That's a rule in English. Okay? So he counted it to the Lord, and the Lord, or he believed the Lord, and the Lord counted it to Abram as righteousness, which is how it is traditionally interpreted. Okay? We're going to, let me ask it this way. Are we righteous?
No, no.
Inherently we're not, right? Because we're sinners, okay? So the righteousness that we have through sanctification is imparted to us by the Holy Spirit, okay? So the only person that can give us righteousness is God, okay? So Abram's not going to count the righteousness for himself. He's not able to do that. God is counting it to him as righteousness. What's the it?
The promise.
The what?
His belief.
His belief, his faith. Okay? But does Abram have his own faith?
He's believing in his word.
God gave him the faith, right? So God is counting the thing that he gave to him as righteousness. And that's really cool.
Isn't that what grace is?
It is. Thank you for saying that. I was hoping someone would go there. Grace is getting the thing that we don't deserve. And faith is included in that. Okay?
Pastor,
Yes?
didn't Mary, the mother of Jesus, have the same kind of thing going on? I mean, God told her she was going to have a son, and try to explain everything to her. Eventually, she just accepted it on faith, It's like, maybe she
Well, and-
didn't really fully understand what was going to happen.
So Luke chapter 1, right, when Gabriel comes to Mary, Mary says, like, how can this be? Right? Is that doubt? No, she just wants a little bit. She's like, I haven't had sex yet. This is impossible. Right? Like, just let me know what's gonna. Oh, well, the Holy Spirit's gonna come. Oh, okay. Well, that's how it's gonna be. You know what I mean? So yeah, I've never connected this chapter with the Magnificat before, but I like the connection. That's good. Okay. Good. All right, you guys ready for the weird stuff? All right, let's do it. Verses 7 through 11. This middle section won't take very long. The last one will. Okay? And he said to him, so antecedent problem again. And the Lord said to Abram, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. And he said, O Lord God, how am I to know that I shall possess it? He said to him, bring me a heifer 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. So just go collect those somehow. And he brought him all of these, cut them in half, and laid each half over against the other. And he did not cut the birds in half. And when the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. Say what? Excuse me? like all of a sudden we have, like, number the stars, it will be counted to you as righteousness. Cut the animals in half. Like, it's just, my God. Yeah, that's not an easy task, right?
You think about all this because God never presented himself in a physical being. These are all coming through some.
Well, yeah, so verse 1, right? And the Lord came to Abram in a vision.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go cut a cow in half.
Can you
Okay.
imagine Sarah? Of a household?
Well,
What is he doing?
have you ever,
On the kitchen table.
so my daughter is really big into this movie called Babe. Do you guys remember that?
Yes.
With the little pig, and he kind of goes around and gets trained as a sheepdog, right? And the wife sees the husband training this pig, and she's just like, what are you doing, right? They're being the same thing, right? Like, Sarah's just like, sure, take the heifer. I don't understand. But heifers were actually really expensive. Why would heifers be expensive?
So they build your herd.
Produce milk and
Build your
other cows, right? So normally when you see the sacrifices in the Old Testament, it's all the male ones. Because the male ones are dispensable. The female ones aren't so much, okay? So taking a heifer, this is like, I think Sarah might have put up a bit of a fight. Like, no, like we need this one, right? Like take the other one that's not so cool or doesn't give us so much, right? And a female goat, 3 years old, a ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. I mean, it's quite the cacophony of
And 3
animals.
years old.
And it's got to be 3 years old. Literally a smorgasbord.
But he never tells him to cut them in half, he just cuts them in half. Why is that? Did I miss that?
No,
He doesn't tell him.
I never noticed that before.
He doesn't tell him to present that, he just said, go gather these.
Go get them. Huh. I need to write that down. Because I don't know why that is. So these birds of prey are coming. Abram has to shoo them away. The birds of prey smell the dead animals trying to come land on them. This is not like a happy thing, right? This is not number the stars and it will be given to you. This is, again, like pretty physical. But, okay, good, all right. Should we move on? Maybe this will make more sense. Maybe it'll be clear as mud. Okay, so verse 12 through 20. As the sun was going down. Okay, so this, through 16, there's a fourth. Okay, so as the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram. And behold, dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. Then the Lord said to Abram, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace, and you shall be buried in a good old age. And they shall come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So this isn't getting better, right? Like this isn't getting happier at all.
He's telling us it's gonna be a rough road, it's not just gonna be a piece of.
This is not going to be a piece of cake. Your descendants are not going to be happy for the first 100 years. your descendants are going to go through great trials and tribulations.
They go to Egypt, isn't it?
That's when they go to Egypt. So, very good. What book of the Bible do they go to Egypt? Oh, come on.
Exodus.
Exodus, the next book. Okay? So, we got Genesis, Exodus, first two books of the Bible. Exodus, they go down to Egypt because Joseph gets sold down there, brings the family with the family, and they're all in Egypt. Okay? So, we have the promise of the Exodus in the 15th chapter of the Bible. That is a very big deal. Because this is not going to happen for 3 more generations. God's telling Abram what is going to happen in the future. It doesn't sound great. If you ever read the New Testament, being a Christian doesn't sound great either. Okay? So, we have Abram in a great darkness, which is terrifying. Okay? What else? We have a direct connection to the Exodus, which is very nice. To link the 2 books together. Notice at the end of verse 14, and they will come out with great possessions. What is this supposed to make us think of?
Possessions usually material items.
Material items, and this has already happened. When did this already happen?
When Abram went to the kings, and fought the kings, and
Before that. And at the end of chapter 12, he goes down to Egypt. What happens?
Pharaoh pays
The Pharaoh pays him to get out of Egypt. This is a foreshadowing of what's going to happen with the Exodus. If God did it to Abram, he can do it to his children. Okay? We've got some verbs that are going to be coming up a lot. Know, sojourn, enslaved, afflicted. These are going to be verbs that come up in Exodus. Okay? 4 generations in Egypt. How long is a generation?
That's 20 years.
For us, it's like 20 years. But they were in Egypt for longer than 80 years. So God's counting a generation as 100.
Because it says 400 years.
400 years,
4 generations.
which is like, that's weird to us, right? Because when we count generations in 20 years, it's hard for us to know what our grandchildren are talking about, let alone anybody younger than our grandchildren, right? I just read an article about the new generation that's coming up. They're calling it the Gen Alpha. We've heard of that because we went through, we had Gen X, then Gen Y, then Gen Z, and now we're going back to the beginning of the alphabet. So we're on Gen Alpha now, and the article talks about how the slang that they're using is so specialized that like we literally can't understand what they're saying. They know what they're saying, but if you hear them, you won't be able to figure it out. Like in your generation, what was like a slang thing that you used? That your parents, what?
Pig Latin.
Pig. Would you say like radical? Like that's radical, or something
Cool.
like that, right? Like your parents were like, oh, like what? Okay, like that's fine. Like you understand it. Like cool. You understand what that means. You never had to ask someone, well, what does cool mean? You just knew it, right? But if I say sigma to you, that's what they're using now. You have no idea, right? Oh, that's Riz. What? Okay. So you can ask your grandchildren about that. Okay. Anything else in this section before we get to the last couple verses?
Yeah, what was the iniquity of the Amorites that wasn't yet?
Why is that not complete? What are we waiting for?
Why Amorites?
Why the Amorites? Why not all of the other ites?
Yeah.
The Girgashites, the Jebusites, the Perizzite, like, come on now. It's gotta be the Amorites. If you wanna look up the Amorites, you can on Google. It's probably gonna give you a lot of information you probably don't need to know. Okay? What does that tell us about God? This is actually a very important point. And one that most people would skip over, I would say.
He has a plan.
He has a plan.
Is it something to do with that? Third and fourth generations
It's-
of them
it's-
hating?
It's possible. You can make that argument. That is biblical. Okay? But what does that say about God's plan?
It's not
Long
finished.
ranging.
It's long ranging. It's not immediate.
And it's not gonna be just a breeze, it's not gonna just be, he's gonna open this path, kinda like the Red Sea, and just say, okay, let's march through it, and it's gonna be peaches and cream. There's gonna be a lot of trials and tribulations to get to the end game.
And what we experience, the judgment that we do experience, or that other people experience, is not unwarranted. If the Amorites are sinning by worshiping other gods, that worship is not complete enough to destroy them. Because God is love, right? So it's going to take a while for them to get to that point, and God's going to let them dig their own hole. Because He does that for us too. And apparently it's going to take 400 years for that to happen. That's all I know about it.
It gives them some comfort though, that in 15, as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. So there's comfort. Okay, it's bad, but for you, you're gonna have a little bit of goodness.
Now your offspring, they're really gonna go through it, but you got it good. Right? Like, yikes, that's rough. That's a hard message. No one wants that for their offspring. We all want it to be better for our children, not worse.
And at this time too, Abraham was maybe several hundred years old.
Probably, I would say probably between 90 and 100.
For us, that's many generations.
For us, it's a lot. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he's not a couple hundred yet. Okay. All right. Move on. Moving right along. Muppet movie? Anybody? No? Okay. Verse 17. When the sun had gone down and it was dark. Okay, so we can see how time is kind of evolving here. So verse 12, as the sun was going down. Well, what does that mean?
Nighttime's coming.
Does that mean like dusk? Sure. Does it mean the 15 minutes before dusk? Sure. I don't know. There's no way to know. But in verse 17, some time has passed when the sun had gone down and it was dark. Behold, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your offspring, I have given this land. From the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. How many more ites do you want? You got them all.
Wow.
In order for them to gain that, was there war? Did they fight all these people?
Yeah. Read the book of Joshua. War, war, war. Judges too. Okay? So, what are we supposed to make out of it? This is crazy. This is weird. talking about verse 17. That is weird. There's a smoking pot and a flaming torch that go through the dead carcasses. What? Why is this in the Bible? Okay, so that's a very, very good point. Okay, we could say that this is an offering. Okay, chances, so that I like the way that your head's at. Okay, it's probably not an offering because the carcasses don't get burnt. Okay.
One says furnace.
Okay. So what are we supposed to make of this? It seems like an impasse. Like we have no possible way to connect anything that we know about the Bible with this point. Okay? So, did you have something to say?
Well, when I first read this, I was thinking, it says the river of Egypt, is that the Nile?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got the Nile River here, the Euphrates River here, and all of this on the inside. So here are the two pieces of the carcass, and the fire is going right between them.
Can you explain that again?
The two pieces of the carcass.
Oh, they represent the rivers?
Yes.
Oh. And the flaming pot would then represent Abram? Or his descendants?
His descendants, they're in that land in between.
I've never heard that interpretation before.
Well, that's because it's mine.
I'm going to offer a different one,
Okay.
and then you tell me which one you like better. Okay? Because that's not like the way that you present it. That can make sense, right? Because you're making the direct connection to the text and paralleling the two verses. Okay, so that does work. Okay, when we see, so this is a theophany again. Okay, do you remember what theophany means from last week?
No.
Do you want me to write it on the board again? Okay.
Epiphany.
Theophany, right? So theo is God, and phanos means appear or appearance. So it's an appearance of God. So God came to Abram in a vision. Then later in verse 13, he's speaking to him, "Know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs." Verse 17, when the sun had gone down and it was dark, behold, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between the pieces. Okay? Furnace, pot, how is a furnace, like, when we think furnace, we think big honking metal thing, right? So it's probably not that. So something that has fire in it would be the equivalent, okay? So when we think of theophanies, the appearances of God, how does that normally happen?
Fire, burning bush.
Burning bush with fire, pillar of flame and smoke, right? And where does that happen? Which book does that happen in? Exodus, which is what we were just talking about, right? So normally in the Old Testament, God appears as either a cloud, smoke, or fire. So it is reasonable to think that this is a theophany of God, an appearance of God, passing through these dead carcasses, which is not something that we normally associate as an activity of God. Something that you do not know is that it was common practice back then when people made a treaty to cut an animal in half and walk through the carcass. Not like through, like, there's probably a path, like with blood, okay? So it wasn't that gross. But they did that because whoever broke the treaty would become like the carcass. They would be dead, okay? So God, notice in verse 18, on that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram. Covenant is like a treaty, okay? And this is going to give you goosebumps, I hope. This is the piece de resistance, okay? In Hebrew, it doesn't say make. You cannot make a covenant in Hebrew. The only verb that you can use with a covenant is the verb cut. You cut a covenant. So on that day, God cut a covenant with Abram, saying, to your offspring I have given this land. Now notice about this treaty. Normally with treaties, both sides walk through. Does Abram walk through the carcasses? No. Only the theophany of God does. So whose responsibility is it to keep the covenant? God's. That is strong. There's nothing that Abram can do to get the land of Canaan. The only way he can get it is if God gives it to him.
To this offspring, I give this land.
Because Abram has this little spot, right, by the oaks of Mamre that he's got, but he doesn't, excuse me, he doesn't have the whole land. So he doesn't own the land of Canaan. It belongs to all these other ites. But God is going to give it to his offspring.
How big is Canaan?
So Canaan, how do we draw Canaan?
J.
Big J, little circle, squiggly line, bigger oval. Okay? So Israel and Canaan are between roughly, okay, like give or take, 50 miles or something. So this is the Mediterranean Sea. So this spot right here is generally what we're talking about. This little box. Which is still what people are fighting over today.
Yes.
It's a big deal. Why? Because of all of these ites, the descendants of all these ites still want that land because they were there first.
They have a Palestinian. Obviously they don't believe what God said as far as Israel.
Correct.
Shame on them.
Well, if you're not Jewish or Christian, then that argument is null and void.
Yeah.
Right? So that's okay. So which one do you like better?
I like the combination of the two of them.
I was literally thinking while I was saying that, I was like, you could probably just add that in. It would probably work just as well. So, no, it's really good, really good. Okay? So, chapter 15. Get it, got it good? Questions, comments, concerns, weather reports, sports scores. Think it's supposed to rain today, possibly? Question mark, question mark?
Not till late.
Not until later, okay. There you go. All right, next week we'll do 16. 16 is, 16 is a sad story. It's just not great, okay? 17 will be pretty intense. And then 18 and 19 we'll be through Genesis before you know it. Okay, good. So let's say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven,